Hey guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to talk about how to achieve a film look with your photographs. So it is a question that I quite often get asked is how do you color grade your photos, or how do you give it that film kind of look? And I know it's a very popular look that's been going around for years and years now, that a lot of people love to imitate a film look in their photographs. So to answer a few of these questions, I wanted to do a video today where we go through a couple of points in how to give that film look to your photographs in Photoshop. So a few of the points that I'm going to go over involve the coloring of the image, but also involves a couple of techniques that will really help the images achieve that film style look. So the first tip that I'm going to give you guys today is actually going to be about the brightness and contrast of the image. So assuming that we're kind of going for a more softer, older film style that looks a bit more aged, I would definitely recommend looking into ways to make your image less contrasted. Obviously, there are lots of different styles of film photos though, so you can create your film inspired photos however which way you like. There's a lot of inspiration on places like Pinterest as well. So the first tip is going to be using a curves layer in Photoshop. Now, I definitely recommend this if you are going to try anything with a film effect, because you can really lift the shadows to give it that softer effect too. So I would generally use an adjustment layer, so a curves adjustment layer located just over here. And I'm just going to bring this down. So in this box here, we're going to move the line into an S curve. So I'll show you guys what that's actually going to do, but lifting the line up, we're sort of making the highlights a bit brighter. And then moving the shadows down, we're obviously making them a lot darker. So I'm going to move them a little bit closer to the line just to make it a little bit less contrasted. And then I'm going to lift the shadows. So that's this point here. I'm going to move that up, and you can see by doing that, it's giving less contrast in the shadows and actually lifting the lightness of them up. So we're going to do that. We're going to lift it up a little bit to about there. And then we're going to move down the highlights to create the opposite effect on the highlights. We're actually moving them down and creating a flatter highlight overall. So we're going to move that down there. And then you can move these points to kind of create a little bit less contrast if you want. So I don't want the image to be too bright, but I also don't want it to be too dark and contrasted. So it's kind of easy to create that S curve with the line like that. So I'm pretty happy with that. So as you can see, just with that one curves layer, turning that on and off, it really does give the image a different effect, and you're pulling away that contrast and making it a lot softer. You don't really have true black and true white at the highlights and shadows there. So you're giving it a lot more of a softer gray effect. So if you're going for an aged film look, this really does help to achieve that look just by using that one curves layer. Now, along with this tip, you might want to create an adjustment layer for selective color. So I would just bring one of these up as well. And when working with images that contain quite a bit of skin tone, like this image, it is a beauty image. So I would actually focus on just color correcting the skin tone before I go into much more color grading with the image. And usually I would do this by going to the reds and moving the magentas down a bit, just to remove that saturation a little bit in the skin tone. And also bringing down the yellows as well. So you can move them down to however you see fit, but usually the reds and the yellows is what you'll be working with the skin tone. So just turning that on and off, you can see the saturation's kind of gone down a little bit more with that. We might actually come back to that layer and tweak it more in a little bit, but my next step would be to choose a color combination for the film effect in your photographs. So you can choose many different types of color combinations to give it a more film or retro style effect. My favorite one would probably have to be a blue and yellow solid color. So that's usually what I use, is an adjustment layer in the solid color section. I'm going to show you guys my example here of color combinations. So I would usually use like a dark kind of blue, like around that kind of area, and then click OK. And this is where I would change the blending mode on the color. So usually if I'm trying to get the color in the shadows, which I usually like to pick two colors, and I like to have one color in the shadows and one color representing the highlights of the image. So if you use certain blending modes, you will get the colors showing up in certain parts of the image. And usually I like to choose lighten for this particular color, because it actually fills in the shadows of the image, and that gives it a really retro kind of effect and an aged effect. But I will bring the opacity down quite a bit, let's say to about 35% on this image. So clicking that on and off, you can see it's just given it a bit of a different vibe already. Now I'm going to bring up another solid color, like I said before, And I'm actually going to choose more of a darker yellow color for this. So I'm going to make sure it's not too much of a saturated yellow, but probably around that area there. So this color combination of the yellow/green and blue will give it a very retro and vintage style, very aged effect. So now we're going to change the blending mode on this one to multiply, and that's actually going to bring the yellow through in the highlights and the midtones. So I'm going to bring down the opacity again because we don't want it to be too strong on this layer. We just want it to give a slightly different vibe, and I'm just going to bring that down even more. So yeah, you can see it just kind of flattens out those highlights even more and gives it a little bit more of a mood to the image. So I'm going to do a before and after just so you guys can see what the color grading has actually done. So that's the before, and that is the after with the curves and color grade. So you can see there's a massive difference there. Now we're going to go back to the selective color now just to tweak the skin tones even more. So I'd probably bring down the magentas a little bit and the yellows just a little bit more, just to make sure we're not oversaturating there in those sections. So you can see what it would look like if we didn't have that selective color layer there. So I like just having it a bit more faded like that. And you can also go back to the curves layer to tweak it a little bit more if you want a little bit more highlight, or if you want the shadows to be a bit darker, but I think we'll keep them around the area that we had them in before. So then for my next step, it would be to create a grain. So how I do this is usually by scrolling down to the background layer and then duplicating this background layer, dragging it into the new layer button. And then I would go to filter, noise, add noise. And my favorite way to do this is to click Gaussian and monochromatic. And this is because it creates a black and white noise on top of it. If you don't have monochromatic checked, you'll actually get a very colorful noise, which is not my ideal way of doing it. It's just personal preference though. So I like to click monochromatic and Gaussian, and around about 13%, probably a little bit less for this image. Let's say about 10%, and we'll click OK. So there you've got your grain. You can see the difference that has made. I actually like to get it looking even softer, so I usually go to filter, blur, and then Gaussian blur. And I would select a 1 radius for the blur. Let's click OK. And you can see it's given it a really soft effect overall. I just like taking away that sharpness from the grain sometimes and making it look really vintage. So I'm going to do a before and after now, just so you guys can see the whole before and after before I go back and tweak anything else. So this is the before image and this is the after image. So there's going to be a few more things that I just tweak a little bit further, and I might actually just go back to selective color, and you can actually achieve the same effect that I did with the color combinations using solid color within the selective color tab as well. So to do this, I would usually go down to blacks and then move the colors around to see what that looks like in the shadows. So you can really get a few cool color combinations within that and really create some cool effects. I'm not going to tamper with it too much, maybe just the neutrals a little bit. So I might just kind of see if I can get any other cool looks with this. And the whites usually I would use for the highlights. So you can really make it look quite vintage if you want to. And as a final touch, I would actually bring up a vibrance layer and usually just kind of bring that down a little bit. Just there, just to kind of take away that extra saturation. And then I would create another snapshot just to show you guys what I've quickly just done. So you can see that I've just added a little bit more of a color grade to it. But let's go to a full before and after again. So this is the before image and this is the after image. As I said, there's lots of different color combinations that you can pick with the colors selected here. You can choose lots of different colors for the shadows and the highlights to create some really cool film style effects. But this is generally my step-by-step on how to create a film look with your photographs. It's just important to remember about the shadows and highlights and how they look if you want more of an aged look or if you want more of a crisp film look. And then obviously the color combinations, which we have spoken about, and how they work together in terms of giving a photo a certain vibe and a certain film vibe. And then lastly, a film grain always really helps it achieve that film-like effect as well. So guys, I hope you really enjoyed this tutorial, and if you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to make sure you see all the videos that I have coming up in future. If you'd like to see more videos like this one, please let me know in the comments section below, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!